Hey everyone, Retro Tech Dad here, and I'm so excited for this one as I've got a special package here that was sent over to me. For those that might be unaware, I co-host the Retro Handhelds podcast every Monday and Thursday, and if you haven't seen it, definitely check us out sometime over at the Retro Handhelds channel, which I always have linked down in the description. Now, our producer, who lovingly goes by the name of Sony, sent this package over to me, and it's definitely a real treat. Sony has been a long-time supporter, and we actually became friends even before I started this YouTube channel, and so this thank you to him is an extra special one. Anyways, if you've seen the thumbnail or title, you probably already know what's inside. And really, this doesn't show well on camera just how small of a package this is, considering we've got a laptop computer in here. But not just any kind of laptop. The Toshiba Libretto 50CT, which is part of a line of mini notebook computers that was first introduced by Toshiba in 1996, and literally squeezed a full Windows x86 PC into a device the size of a paperback book. In fact, the name Libretto is derived from the Italian word for booklet, and there's no doubt that this computer was very much the size of one. So let's delve inside this box and go back in time to 1997, when I was most definitely not a retro tech dad, and I'm gonna go ahead and date myself here, but I was a whole lot younger at the ripe old age of 11. It's safe to say that when the Libretto 50CT released for a whopping $2,000, which today is the equivalent of about $4,000, this type of portability was not cheap. And given how expensive it was, 11-year-old Rob definitely did not own one of these back in the day, and so for me, this is a new experience, but for others, this might be an awesome nostalgia trip. As we go through this box, I'll continue to talk about this particular Libretto, and there's all sorts of goodies in here, including a lot of accessories, and up first is a port replicator which attached to the back of the Libretto 50CT. And as one might imagine for 1997 tech, having a full Windows computer with this tiny footprint meant there were some sacrifices that needed to be made. The port replicator elegantly added a serial, VGA, and printer port to this laptop, and did so without really adding much bulk or weight. I'm sure some of my audience hasn't seen one of these in a long time, and I believe this was included in the original retail package with the Libretto in 1997. But I'm not entirely sure, and definitely let me know in the comments if you bought one of these back in the day, and whether or not it came with this floppy drive that used the Libretto's PC card slot. And there were many accessories that could make use of this slot for all sorts of expanded functionality, which is pretty cool. Now, Sony was kind enough to include the full user's guide that came with the Libretto 50CT, and first off, I just have to appreciate how clearly loved this device was, and it's truly an honor to have this in my possession. Peeking inside the user's guide and right on the welcome page, we have an entry that states, "Welcome to the world of portable computing. With your new Toshiba Libretto 50CT mini notebook, your work can truly follow you wherever you go." The Libretto 50CT offers a fast Intel Pentium processor. Speaking of, this is the perfect time to talk about the full specs of the Libretto 50CT, which, as that entry mentioned, is powered by a 75 MHz, yes, that's double digits, Pentium processor, 16 MB of RAM, an 810 MB 2.5-inch IDE hard disk drive, an awesome Yamaha OPL3-SA2 Sound Blaster Pro compatible sound chip, and a beautiful 6.1-inch active matrix TFT screen with a 640 by 480 resolution. There was actually a super cool Pentium keychain that Sony included inside this package, and this will probably become a permanent fixture here for the channel, since it's a pretty cool piece of history, and oddly enough, one of my favorite things included here. So we've got a charging station which allowed you to charge a spare battery while you had another one in the unit, and what's amazing is that these batteries still work all these years later. I have a Book 8088 that had its battery swell up on me only a year later, and it's really true when they say that they just don't make them like they used to. And in here we've got a larger port replicator or docking station that featured two PS2 ports for a keyboard and mouse, a serial and printer port, as well as VGA output, and an additional PCM CIA slot. We've actually got a fairly small power adapter, and this is the original Toshiba power adapter that provided 60 watts to the Libretto and other models as well. And last but not least, another awesome little bonus of a Lego style Macintosh, which is surely going to be seen again in the future here. And so now comes the moment of the Libretto 50CT being held in my hands for the first time. And it is truly remarkable just how compact this unit is. For a frame of reference to some modern devices, here's a GPD WinMax 2 and an original GPD win compared to the size of this Libretto. In fact, the user guide takes up almost the same footprint as the very device it's about. Alright, let's go ahead and open the lid, which is secured into place by 2 locking mechanisms on the sides, and it helps keep it secure during transport. The hinge, after almost 30 years, still works as it should, and holds its place in any position up to 180 degrees, which is pretty remarkable. The inside holds that impressive 6.1-inch display, as well as the speaker, power button, and the mouse nub. Yes, that little nub on the right of the display is used as your mouse input, and surprisingly works very well with the left and right click on the opposite side of the lid, and the manual even demonstrates the proper acupoint hand positions. Now, if you're a lefty like me, you're kinda out of luck, but thankfully I'm ambidextrous and have been using a mouse with my right hand for many years now. And finally, the keyboard, which has been shrunk down to fit this chassis that measures 8¼ inches by 4½ inches. And has the most delicate touch to the typing experience. It's incredibly quiet with a very short and soft travel. Each cap is smaller than the tip of my fingers, and so I don't think you will be speedrunning an essay on this. But I imagine for those that wanted this level of portability, it was a minor compromise to be able to interact with Windows at a scale like this. And almost certainly any keyboard is most welcome, especially without the use of any touch input. So it's time to power this on, and I'm going to remain quiet for the boot up process so that we can just take in the nostalgic sounds of Windows 95. Now, you might have noticed that the boot up was very quiet, and that's because the original hard disk drive was replaced with a compact flash solution, and so it is as quiet as can be compared to what an actual hard disk drive would have sounded like. And before we take a brief tour of Windows 95, let's actually peek under the hood very quickly and see what's going on inside of this unit, and take a look at that swap that was made. With the power of editing, I've removed the 7 screws that hold the bottom in place, and we now have a look at that 512MB compact flash that was installed here in place of the hard disk drive. A nice upgrade for sure. I don't want to go too deep because of the age of the unit and because Sony was kind enough to let me even do this. The plastic is quite delicate and brittle because of its age, and so I don't want to add any unnecessary stress to it. But it is really neat to get a glimpse of what's going on here, and I'm impressed by how clean everything looks. So back to Windows 95, and I can't even tell you the last time I've seen Windows 95, but I will say it's certainly been a while. It's amazing how little came with Windows back in the day, and it truly was a much simpler time. But there are definitely niceties that I appreciate with a more modern version of Windows, just not Windows 11. I will say that navigation is certainly very interesting using the acupoint system, but you do get used to it, and it surprisingly works better than one might think. It's definitely a clever design. And just going through some of the programs that are installed here, and there's an MPEG player here, and let's see if we have any video footage that we can test. And hey, there is a test video. And wow, a 2-second clip. The power of Pentium, folks. Best of all though, it does look like we have Microsoft Word 97 on here, and I do wonder if Clippy is around to help out. And unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, Clippy is not. So while we're in Windows, we're one step closer to doing what I love the most on this channel, and that's of course getting to some gaming. I actually realized I don't have a way to load any media onto this, and so my first mission was to purchase a PCM CIA to compact flash adapter, which is readily available on Amazon, so this will let me add programs and anything else I might want to the Libretto easily. I'm going to use my main desktop PC to act as the intermediary between the two. For my modern desktop, I already had a compact flash USB reader, so I was good to go in terms of accessories for it. But I did need to get an actual compact flash card, and this too was readily available on Amazon. These are plentiful, and so I was able to get one in quickly, which is pretty nice. I went with a brand I knew, and so I did spend a little more, but I ended up with a Transcend 8GB flash card that is more than enough for all of the goodies I will load up on here, considering games of that time really didn't require a whole lot of storage. And likewise, this unit didn't have a whole lot of storage to work with. So now that I'm all accessorized, let's get to some gaming, and it only seems fitting to start with Doom, and answer the eternal question of whether or not it could run Doom. This Libretto with its 75 MHz Pentium can in fact run Doom, and imagine this, it's 1997, and not only are you playing Doom, you're playing it on a truly portable device that you can take with you. And I think something many of my viewers from the handheld world will appreciate. In fact, the first official port of Doom to a handheld gaming device didn't take place until 2001 for the Game Boy Advance. And I gotta say, I never get tired of the awesome Doom soundtrack. It just pumps me up every single time I hear it. So while this Libretto might not be as powerful as later revisions in the lineup with more powerful Pentium processors, the humble 75 MHz Pentium in the 50CT could still handle a good amount of stuff, but really this little machine makes for a great retro and portable computer for all of your DOS games. And let me tell you, I started loading up a bunch of cool games like a personal favorite of mine, Jazz Jackrabbit, and as a racing game fan I couldn't resist and I loaded up both the original Need for Speed and Screamer, which has recently returned in a brand new game. Now, Doom wasn't the only first-person shooter I had to try out on this Libretto, and I loaded up both Duke Nukem 3D and the software-based version of Quake, which ran pretty well despite the humble 75 MHz processor. It's wild to see how many great games there were prior to 1997 that could run on this tiny laptop. I could easily go on forever, but I'd love to hear about some of your favorites from this era down in the comments section. In the meantime, I've got some Command & Conquer and Diablo both running here on this mini notebook. And all in all, these are some serious games, and I certainly would not have complained having one of these as a portable device back in the day. Of course, how could I forget about emulation? And yes, even back then, emulation was very much a thing, and possible with a device like the Libretto. It was certainly earlier days in the emulation scene, but things like Nesticle and ZSNES, which has seemingly returned out of nowhere as Super ZSNES, all were available back in 1997. And let you get a taste of other platforms' games much like we do today, and of course, much to the dismay of companies like Nintendo. In fact, 1997 was kind of a big deal in terms of emulator development, because we saw the rise of many emulators like the aforementioned Nesticle for NES emulation, ZSNES for Super Nintendo emulation, but also Genesis for Genesis emulation, and arcade emulation with MAME among others released around this time. It's pretty cool to see some of these games come to life on this piece of tech from 1997, and I imagine that I would have been just as excited back then as I am for the modern emulators of today. I have pretty fond memories of using something like ZSNES back in the day on my first computer, but that didn't happen for a few more years later. And just like the limited runtime of the Libretto's batteries, it's time for us to wrap things up here, and I hope you've enjoyed revisiting this very interesting piece of technology from 1997, and this is now officially the oldest piece of tech I have shown on the channel, which was held higher by the first emulation handheld, the GP32, but I imagine won't be the oldest forever. I'd love to hear about your stories with the Libretto, and did you own one of these back in the day? Do you still have one in your possession? Or were you like me and have always wanted to own one of these? Let me know down in the comments, and until the next video, as always, I am the Retro Tech Dad, and thank you so much for watching.
Winner. It really whips the llama's ass.